Absolutely. So pretty much all of my friends are horse people. And they have beautiful farms. I have friends. There's a large horse community just outside of Palm Beach in the town of Wellington. I'm only an hour away. I have very dear friends. They all have horse farms. They have horses. I lived in Lexington, Kentucky, the Kentucky Bluegrass for 5 years. And I have very good friends there with horses. And every time I visit, we hop in that car and go right out to the stables. And so if I need what I call my horse fix, I have a lot of places to go. And I don't ride anymore because for me, it's either or. I'm either going to ride and go for it and get my own horse and train my own horse or not. And I've chosen not to. And I escaped. I rode for 50 years and I don't have to even knock on wood now because I'm not riding again. And I never had an injury. And it's a dangerous sport. You get knocked around a little bit if you're in the horse world, especially as many hundreds and hundreds of horses as I rode. Your odds are you're going to get dinged, stepped on, thrown off, something weird's going to happen. And I got out of 50 years without being injured. So I thought, you know what? And I still have a good back. And the riders suffer a lot of back pain as they get older. So I consider myself fortunate. So.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the author podcast. We get to meet amazing authors from around the world. If you love horses, my wife probably just heard that word and she's probably running down the stairs right now. If you love horses, anything to do with horses and all that great stuff, dressage. Oh, there's so many things we can talk about. My guest today is an expert because he's been around horses for a very, very long time. It finds its way into his story growing up. It finds its way into his writings, and a great gentleman to have on the show. We've got 2 books to talk about today, a memoir and a novel. You're going to fall in love with this gentleman. So glad to have him on the show. Gil, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be here and look forward to our time together.
Excellent. You mentioned to me something about low tide, ocean, something going on here. Can you tell us where you are, Gil? Where do you live?
I am in Vero Beach, Florida, which is on the Atlantic coast. And we're about halfway between Orlando and Miami. They call this Mayberry on the ocean, and it's not very well known. It's not a tourist destination. It's a lot of snowbirds, people like me who kind of finished up their career and went on to do the next thing and wanted a nice, peaceful, quiet, sunny lifestyle. And I live right on the ocean. And I walk every day. That's part of my therapy and my exercise. And so I walk at low tide when the sand is the firmest and it's a little kinder on the lower back. And so my walking each day is determined by the moon. And so I like to say I'm in sync with the universe. So whatever the moon's doing tells me what time I get to walk each day. So
that sounds like such a nice life, Gil. To plan your days around that, I think I'm a little bit jealous up here in Canada as I think of you way down there.
I'm from Northeast Ohio, from the Cleveland area, right on Lake Erie. You send us down your clippers. Thank you very much. I'm very familiar with the cold and the snow, but I also enjoy the break down here. And I've told my friends if they ever hear me complaining about pretty much anything, to tell me to shut up, because if someone's a writer, I think this is the setup that we dream of. That this is what I have to do each day, and I can devote as much time as I want to it, and I have lots of opportunity to think and create and just really delve into it. So I feel blessed that I can be here.
Excellent. Where did your passion for writing come from, Gil?
Writing or riding?
Writing books. Yeah.
I would say, I grew up in Shaker Heights, Ohio. It's a suburb east of Cleveland. And I was born in 1957, so my schooling was in the 1960s and into the 70s in the public schools. And I went to the Shaker Heights public schools, which back then and now win multiple awards for just their high academic standard. And so going through school, I read all the classics, Catcher in the Rye, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Odyssey, all the books that are on the list of the classics. And I enjoyed it. But it wasn't a passion at that point. It wasn't until I graduated from college and was starting to travel for my career and living overseas. I'd always grab a book and bring it with me. And the first one, I can remember a friend, it was around 1979. She said, "Oh, you're going to live in Germany and Austria for a while." She said, "I just finished this book, Take It With You." And it was called A Woman of Substance by Barbara Taylor Bradford. A thick book. And I read it every night when I was there. And then a little later, I found Ken Follett as an author. And then I stumbled onto all the popular authors of today. And so I found out I really loved to read for pleasure. And the only writing I did was in my corporate career. I was managing director, chief operating officer, director of finance and admin for different companies in different industries. And part of that job was writing text for annual reports or briefings for a board of directors or maybe some technical things describing procedures. And I enjoyed it. And within an organization, people would often come to me and say, "Hey, I've written this in later days for the web. I've written this for a pamphlet. Could you edit it for me and go through it?" And I really enjoyed that. But it wasn't until even later, until I was 63 years old, so just 5 years ago, that I actually sat down to write anything with the intention of a public audience reading it.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I'm new to the game.
yeah.
I'm new to the game. Yeah.
Wow. And doing quite well already with 2 books out in the world. This is great. Yeah, it's a totally different writing process to write for an audience, this type of audience.
Yeah, it really is. In the corporate world, it's a very limited audience. You're writing to the board of directors, possibly the shareholders. It might be a team that you're working on. It could be, in those cases, it might have been distributed to our customer base, but not always. In the later years with the internet, it was, but different kind of writing, very, very different kind.
So you have writing and you have riding. Your riding background and horses, where did your love for horses begin for you?
I write about this in the memoir, which is called Haunted Victory. When I was 8 years old, my father's sister and a large extended family lived in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And we went down every summer. They were just south of Virginia Beach in Sandbridge. And my cousins owned and rode horses at Princess Anne Stables in Virginia Beach. And I tagged along one day and they had the riding lesson and I was watching and I was just enthralled. I fell in love with horses, everything about it. And it was a nice summer day and I was watching them ride. And when they finished, I'm guessing the riding instructor could see that I was kind of on the edge like this, just staring at me.
Yeah.
She said, "Would you like to get on?" Yeah. So I got on Mr. Buttons. He was this medium-sized Appaloosa gelding. And I got on and I was hooked. As soon as the horse took his first step, that sensation of movement with a horse underneath and having had a chance to pet his nose and see his eye and connect, and I was hooked. And my father had ridden as a youth. He played polo in Pinehurst, North Carolina when the family vacationed there. And I had cousins up in Ohio. Again, I was living in Shaker Heights at the time, and they rode at a local riding camp called Red Raider Camp. And I started tagging along with them, and then I signed up for a program of weekly lessons throughout the fall when I was 11 years old and kept going. So.
What is your connection with horses, even at that young age? What was it about a horse that really connected you?
I think, I know very specifically, in my case, I was a very, very small, effeminate-looking, weakling kind of boy. I wasn't, I was small. I was always the smallest kid in the class. I was horrible at team sports, at school sports. It wasn't my thing. And I felt a little disconnected from the other kids at school. And I never went out of my way to participate in anything. I was always held back and kind of kept to myself and was that kind of quiet kid. But when I first met a horse, and there's something about looking in that horse's eye, and there's just a kindness in a horse's eye. There's heart in that animal that you can see through its face. And the way horses interact with children is really amazing. They know that they're a little vulnerable and that they're a little timid and that they can be a little shy. And the horse actually makes gestures to kind of welcome you in, to kind of like, if you want to pet me, you can pet me, and I'm not going to bite you. Don't you worry, and I'm fine. And there was something very reassuring about that. But then after I'd had enough riding lessons that I could take the reins, sit in the saddle on my own, and ask the horse to do things with me, and they would cooperate. And if I didn't get the cues right, if I wasn't asking the right way, you could almost see the horse with a little question mark over its head, like, I'll do what you want, but you got to tell me a little more clearly. What is it you're after here? And then you get it right because you're learning the sport. And then the horse says, oh, I understand what you want. And then all of a sudden they give it to you. And so that's why I just say they have this heart in them. And even when the rider really gets it wrong, maybe they're pulling too hard on that metal bit in their mouth, or they've used a little too much with their leg and they've kicked them on the side and it hurts and they're annoyed. Those animals are strong. And they could get rid of you so fast if they want to, put you in the dirt. They could stomp on you if they wanted to. And there's not any of that in a horse.
Right.
There's just kindness there and generosity. And they will do anything you ask if they understand what you want. And then if they're physically able, they're athletes. They have to be trained. They have to be strong. They have to be balanced. They have to know their job. And it's the rider's job to teach them. But once you're there, they'll do anything for you. And they'll give you their heart. And I think as a kid who wasn't getting that kind of connection with people, I also had a home environment. My mother was clinically depressed throughout my childhood, and my father was an alcoholic until I was 10, and then he became sober, but he drank away from the home. So I kind of grew up without a father presence, and my mother didn't work. This was the 1960s, and stay-at-home moms were typical in middle-class America, but she wasn't emotionally available. We were well taken care of. I'm not saying I had a bad childhood, but there wasn't a lot of emotional connection in our home. And the horses in the stables, I connected certainly to the horses, but it's also where I found my herd, other horse-minded kids. We're all fanatics about the horses. Yeah. And so that's really where that passion took over, where I went to school because I had to, but I couldn't wait to get out and get myself out to the stables because that's where I fit, that's where I belong, that's where my friends were, that's where my herd was, and that's where the horses were.
And that's where you felt a sense of safety, being around the horses and being in that environment. That was a safe place for you to be around those animals, right?
It was. And in the 1960s and in the early 1970s, growing up in Cleveland was a lot like growing up in Detroit or some of these other urban areas. It was a violent time in this country. There were riots in the cities. There was the Vietnam War was going on. There were protests. It was a tumultuous time to be growing up. And I know in my high school, there were racial fights all the time in the hallways. In our high school, we had a kid got shot in the halls, and it's probably just a personal thing, not a racial thing. But then I heard that, at the school next door, somebody had been knifed. Our police department in Shaker Heights was blown up by a crazy bomber, and 2 blocks from my house. And so it was scary for a kid who's 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old. So to finally have a place to go, and the stables were, outside of the suburban area, and it was my safe space. And we could disconnect from what was going on in the world. We were 14 years old, 15 years old, 13 years old. And so it was our place to go and just create our world and around something we all had a passion for.
Now, then things changed, though,
and then
for you.
Then things changed. And
that
this is
safe place, right?
It really changed. What happened was, I've just described myself. I'm this effeminate sissy, and I don't fit in at school. I'm not good at the sports. But when I get on a horse, I'm this little superstar. And I always say every young person, there's something they're just naturally really good at. You put some kids on a lawn and throw a soccer ball out there, and my God, you think they're ready for the World Cup. And you have other kids, put them in a pool and they start swimming like a dolphin. And we all have that thing. Mine was horses. I was built for it. I had an aptitude for it. Whatever it is one needs to be good at that sport, I had that naturally as a kid. So I clicked with the sport and I got really good really fast. And in 1971, and I was 14 years old, it was a fairly large riding camp. They had 70 horses on the property, and they bussed the kids in from the suburbs, which was fantastic. And they brought in a new director of riding. And he and his wife moved onto the property into a small house there. And he was in charge of the beginner and the intermediate and the semi-advanced riding programs. And I was an intermediate at that time. So he oversaw the stables and the program that I was involved in. And there are 40 pages in the book dedicated to how this happened. But he saw me, he was a pedophile, and saw me as this needy, weak, kind of not dejected, but disconnected youth. And he stepped in and started lauding me for my talent. You have what it takes. One day you train with me and stick with me, you might make it to the Olympics. Well, when you're 14 years old and somebody who's twice your age, 28, who comes in, he has credentials, he's come from an high-profile training center in the United States, and he knows all these things we don't know. He's the oracle as far as we're concerned. And so I was invited to his home, and in the course of the evening, he was talking about what it takes to strive for perfection, and it's every single thing, including your training as an athlete. And like any coach, I'm going to get to need to know your body, make sure the muscles are developing equilaterally, that your tendons are loose, and what that resulted in was touching that then went much beyond that. It became much more intimate. And what was amazing is he was married. His wife was in the house, in another room. This was after she'd gone to bed. And this went on for 7 years. And she knew what was going on because she walked in on it at one point and saw the fondling and what was going on and never took any action against it. And I know that before he came to that riding school, he had been at another one and had done the same thing. And I know that after 7 years, when I finally broke away, and it was because I graduated from college and could physically get away from him in Ohio, he moved on to the next victim. And so what I'm writing about in the book, and the reason I wrote the book, was I wanted to say to people who have either been the victim of childhood sexual abuse or really any abuse, and the people who love them, answer the question, how does this happen? How does the pedophile actually lure in these children? Do the children know that it's wrong? And I explain in the book, I knew something was wrong. It didn't feel right. Something about it was absolutely wrong. But he was holding out a dream. Right. The Olympics, and only I can get you there. Right. So you stay with me. Yep, this is part of it. It's kind of the price you're going to pay. And I'm thinking, well, his wife basically knows what's going on. He does know what he's doing. I started to advance in my riding in a big way. I knew I was kind of headed there. And then I found myself locked in and a true victim that I allowed. And people ask, well, why don't you then walk away from this? Why don't you tell your parents? Why don't you tell some other adult? And the answer is, well, now I'm embarrassed. I've gotten myself into this. What if people think I'm gay? This is a man touching another man. What if right. people, I don't want to be called all those slurs. I don't want to be known as that. And I'm 2 years in or 3 years in, and it's like, people are going to think I'm an idiot for not saying anything. And I feel like I'm on my way to the Olympics. I'm going to Europe now in training. I'm getting really good at this, and it's because of him. So I think I better just ride this out. And then it pushed to a point I couldn't take it anymore. He had moved into a home next to the campus where I was going to school. I went to a very small private college in Northeast Ohio called Hiram College, and he had moved right next door to the property and was in my backyard. I couldn't escape it. So throughout college, if I wasn't in the classroom or studying, I was still training with him. We were at the stables, we were riding the horses, we were doing the exercise sessions at home and all that came with that. And then his wife left. She had all she could take, but it was only in my senior year of college. And then I finally realized this is unhealthy. It's abusive. I do need to get out of this. I hadn't told anyone at all that this was going on. And in May of my senior year of college, I thought, count the weeks. You're going to graduate. You can move. You can leave and end all of this. And when he sensed that was what I was doing, he started to panic. And I eventually, what happened, it's the second part of my book. My book's called Healing from Childhood Sexual Abuse and the Decades of Addiction that followed. And what came on the heels of that, in May of that year, somebody from the college was I lived in a dorm, and it was late, it was 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" We kind of knew each other. And he said, "I'm going down to downtown Cleveland to the disco. Do you want to go?" And I thought, it's Thursday night. People don't go to the disco on Thursday nights. And Cleveland was 45-minute drive away. And I thought, well, sure, why not? And we ended up at a place called Trax. And if there was a Studio 54 nightclub in Cleveland, it was Trax. And Thursday night was a big night. And I walked in the door. I had never consumed alcohol with any, once in a while I might have had a beer or a drink. I know I did. I tried marijuana with friends in the dorms, but it wasn't part of my life. I walked in the door and sensory overload. Everybody was there to have a good time. And in 1979, disco was king. And the club was owned by members of the mob. They had a friendly relationship with the police. And you walked in that door and anything goes. And it was smoking marijuana. It was cocaine in the basement. It was, you name it, it went on there. Well, I was hooked because I had been in serious training for 7 years. And I felt like a free man. And what happened, it started the addictive cycle. I had a drink and I feel euphoria because that's what alcohol does for us. And I thought, well, this feels good. And I had then gotten away from my predator. I was living on my own. I was getting ready to go to England for my first job. I was going to be stationed there for 3 months. And I had 6 weeks before I left. And all I did was party with this group of friends. And so it was every night, lots of alcohol, smoking pot. There was cocaine. We did Quaaludes. We did poppers. I played for 6 weeks. And I got hooked to that blast of euphoria because I had suppressed all the trauma around the abuse for 7 years. And literally overnight, the dynamic switched. And so when I finally got established on my own, had my apartment, was in my career, every single night at the end of the day, I started the pattern that went on for 40 years of being a highly functional alcoholic. Because in my family, a good white Anglo-Saxon Protestant family, middle class, every night was cocktail hour. In our house, my mother always had a cocktail, even though my father was a recovered alcoholic. All family events, cocktail hour at 5:30. I had a lot of alcoholism in my family. A lot of my friends had addiction issues. So every day, and in those days, you worked 9 to 5 in an office. I think those days are over with, but I went to the office, left at 5, came home. I had my party friends, and we started drinking, and we smoked our pot. And this was weekdays, but never so much I couldn't get up in the morning, go to work at 9 o'clock, and have a very productive day. And I ended up with big jobs, running companies, and doing, but every single night I drank.
Wow.
Every night. And I understand, and I outline this in my memoir very clearly, the whole dynamic of drinking and what the ethanol and the alcohol does to the body and what it does for the pleasure receptors in the brain and the dopamine releases and why we have another drink even though we're starting to feel depressed. So I really explore that in the book and to go full circle so people understand what it is to come out of a traumatic experience and then self-medicate with alcohol or whatever substance we choose. And in my case, it was all in service to fulfilling this dream of going to the Olympics. Right. I thought, I want my own horse and my own horse farm. Well, that costs money, so I better have a good career. I'm going to need some money. So I stayed functional because I had to have the job. But it wasn't until 40 years later, and I was in an extremely stressful situation that really started in 2017, and I started day drinking. And then over the next 18 months, I was diagnosed with severe cirrhosis and was hospitalized, and I was on my way out. I was the opening line of my memoir is, I had no idea I was dying. And that's how bad it had gotten.
Wow.
And so the memoir is about healing. I'm 5 years sober. I'm thriving. First time in my life, I know what it is to feel sobriety and to be sober. So the memoir is showing people that this was my experience of this, but boy, am I not alone. And so many people wrestle with this and struggle with this. And my message at the end of the memoir is, I'm just one guy, and I'm no different really than anyone else. And along the way, I kept making choices and making choices and making choices. And in my case, it was to fulfill this dream of going to the Olympics. And I went. I ended up at the Olympics. But the choice at the end for me was the doctor looking at me and saying, Mr. Merrick, if you keep drinking, you will die. You might have 3 months left. If you stop drinking, you could live a healthy life. So when the choice becomes keep drinking and die or stop drinking and live, that's as brutal as it gets. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. Of course I want to live. So I choose. Now I need to find out, how do you get sober after 40 years? And I write very clearly in the book how that happens. My message to people is, if you're dealing with issues that I was dealing with, don't wait till you're 63 years old, laying in a hospital bed and being told this could be the end. And so I'm trying to share with my readers the journey in a way that they can relate to it and say, I've experienced part of this. I love somebody who's experienced part of this.
Yes.
I'm in a relationship now, because if we can understand what's going on, then we can usually see some kind of path to heal from the whole experience.
A lot of battling with self-identity from your childhood through with all of the horses and everything we've done in that, your riding, and then also self-identity through alcohol and all of that. There just seems to be like a wrestling for you to find out who you are in all of this.
Absolutely. I was certain my identity up until, probably 10 years ago. I am a horseman, and that's who I am. And yes, I've had this corporate career because I need an income. Horses aren't cheap. I need an income. But my career path went down a very interesting path, but I ended up working for the United States Equestrian Federation as the managing director for the sport of dressage. And part of that was running the high performance programs that run the selection process for our Olympic teams in equestrian.
Wow.
And my job then was to partner with our national coach, who was from Germany at the time, set up the high performance training sessions for the athletes who were vying for a place on the team, work with the different committees that select the team and manage the process of how all that works. And then whether it was the Pan American Games in 2007, World Championships for equestrian in 2006, or the Olympic Games in 2008, I was then the team leader. So it was my job to get the horses, the riders, the grooms, the farriers, the therapists, the partners, all the support team to Rio de Janeiro for the Pan Am Games, to Aachen, Germany for the World Games, and to Hong Kong, which is where equestrian competed, the Beijing Games. And I was the guy. If it was dressage, which is my form of riding that I do in the United States, I was in charge. And I was at the Olympics as the team leader, and that didn't go the way I had always expected it would go. So at the end of the Olympics in 2008, and I write all about how that went off the rails, and that it's not the dream everybody thinks it is. There's a lot that goes on in the lives of those athletes that is, each one of them can write their own book about what goes on. But I left. I got a promotion at the U.S. Equestrian Federation. I was put in charge of 3 additional sports. I did that for a year, and I was being groomed to be the executive director of equestrian sport, and which was my job, my boss's job. And I looked at what he was doing, and he was phenomenal at it. This man's unbelievable. His name's Jim Wolfe, just incredible, incredibly talented man. And I looked and I thought, I don't know that I want that life. I've been doing it for almost 5 years, and I thought, I don't think I want that life. So I stepped out, I resigned. and decided that I would do management training and consulting for corporations. I would also do personal development courses for horse people so that they could be more effective in managing their lives and more effective as horse people. And that I'd had my own education to the top level of the sport. And now I'd spent 4 years literally glued to the hip of the man who was training our Olympic team, who was from Europe. He was an Olympic gold medalist himself, an incredible horseman. Well, for 4 years, I watched him train the riders for the Olympics, and we won medals at international events. And I thought, well, I'm going to take what I know about training horses from the master I learned from, combine it with what I've learned from him about, well, how do you translate that into people who compete on the world stage, and work with the average horse owner on making their horse better. And I did that for almost 10 years. And then, again, there's a lot of detail, and I probably would say to people, if you really want to know how it played out, please read my memoir. But I ended up best friends and companion to a very eccentric, very wealthy woman in California who'd been a supporter of the sport of dressage with her husband for 23 years. And they spent all of their money and all of their time supporting a rider who originally was from Germany. And they sent their horses. Their horses competed and won medals at the Olympics and at the World Championships. They were one of the top sponsors in the country of riders, a rider in that case. They parted ways in 2011. In 2012, her husband of 60 years died of heart problems. And she, for the first time in her life, was alone. And she was panicking about living alone without someone there for her. And the way my job, I had a corporate job at that time, but I could work from anywhere. It was in the 2010s, and you can work remotely. And we were based in Birmingham, Michigan, but I didn't have to be there all the time. So I started spending more and more time near San Diego, which is where she was from. I started traveling with her. She loved me as a travel companion. Of course, I had the horses in common with her. We became dear friends, but I allowed, there's no victim in this. She kept saying, please spend more time with me. Come move out here and live with me. And I'd say, I have a job. I'm vested in this company. I can't walk away from that. And she'd say, stop worrying about money. You move out here with me and you don't have to worry about money. I'll leave you my money. I've got tons of it. And I resisted for a number of years. And then finally, I let myself get sucked in more and more. And I realized she's dependent on me now. If I leave, she'll die. She has no one. And she's become totally dependent on me. And in that situation, I did move out there. And I realized what I'd gotten myself into. My friend said, Gil, you be careful because she's showing early signs of dementia. And as she progresses, she has enough money. She's not going to go into a home. She's going to have caregivers at home. And she's going to live out her life at home. And you're going to manage that care. And it's not going to be easy. They were absolutely right. And so when COVID came and we no longer could travel and we could no longer go to the restaurant she loved and we took lots of trips, I'm locked in a house in this situation, and that's when I started day drinking. And after 18 months, I was killing myself with the poison. So it was, and what I write about in the book, when I walked away from the Olympics, and then I walked away from actively riding and training because it didn't work in my life anymore. And it was a decision. I didn't have a dream anymore. I was like a little cork on the ocean. I was just floating around wherever it took me. I didn't have any passion left. There wasn't anything I was seeking or building or wanted. And so the alcohol was a way to numb myself. I literally wanted my life situation to go away. I didn't want my life to end. I just wanted the situation I was in to go away. I wanted it to be something else. And I was stuck by my own doing, and I didn't know how to get out of it. And so I turned to the alcohol. And as any alcoholic will tell you, when I was in my downfall, I didn't know I was in a downfall.
Right.
You're blind to it, which amazes me now to look back. But now I understand, and I write about that, how that happened and how we become blind to it, how we stay in denial. And people around us who love us are trying to help us, and they're trying to do the right thing, and we resist the help, and we lie, and we tell ourselves we're doing okay. I'm still functional. We lie to our friends about how much we're drinking. And the truth is we're killing ourselves.
Right.
And so my book, it's a message of healing. I have a very, very positive message at the end for people, again, who are dealing with these issues or know someone who is.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I think there's so many things that people can pick up on from a reading perspective for your book that could really help a lot of people through this. What kind of stories are you hearing back from readers? I was flipping through some of your reviews on Amazon, and very heartfelt comments from your reader base for Haunted Victory. What are you hearing as an author from people reading the book?
Comment, without exception, every person who I speak with, who I run into, says, hey, I got a copy of your book, or people I know from the horse world who read it, or sometimes somebody will email me, through my website. Everybody has their own story to share, either from themselves or someone they love. And that's what they want to do. They want to connect with me by saying, what you wrote resonated because I have this story. And and that's the reward to me for writing the book. When I left California, my friend passed away, was what actually happened. So I got out of the situation. I was in therapy because of the drinking. This was after I was hospitalized and came out. Tremendous, tremendous woman, just a phenomenal therapist. And when I was ready to leave California, I'd been with her for a year. She said, I'm not licensed outside of California. I can't keep working with you. And I said, what? I really am depending on this. What do I do? And she said, well, of course, you can find a new therapist. And I thought, take a whole year just to bring them up to speed. She said, you know what you could do? She said, write your story about that. Write an autobiography. And that's what she called it. And she said, just write it down. Your life story, what you've been through. Well, it ended up being, I did. And I spent 3 months just trying to figure out, where have I been? Like geographically, where was I in my life? And it took months. I had 3 passports, and I went through the passports, and I made a spreadsheet on Excel. And I just took all the visa stamps and said, what was the city and the country? And what was the date? Was I going in or going out? And then I started sorting through the Excel to get the timeline of where I'd been over all those years. Wow. And then I said, next question, why were you there?
Yeah.
Why were you in Germany and England and France and Australia for 6 years? And why were you in Hong Kong and Asia and Singapore and Bali? Why were you in these places? So then I started to outline that. And then I said, okay, what got you there? And it always came back to, what choice did I make at the time that had me be there? And it was always a choice around the horses and my passion to fulfill that dream. And then I could see very clearly when that dream ended and I no longer had a passion is when I went off the deep end. And I started floundering. And then I allowed myself to go into a space. My friend adored me and I adored her, but she treasured me and never stopped telling me how much she loved me and how much she loved me being there for her. And she would say to me, if I didn't have you in my life, I'd find a way to kill myself. So there was some emotional kidnapping that was going on in that situation as well, but I was vulnerable to it. And so when I finally wrote this autobiography and people said, you should share that story. I think it would help people. I really think you should share that. And so I found a coach, a writing coach named Brenda Smith-James. And she said, you have a fascinating life and a fascinating story, but you're not a celebrity and nobody's going to care. She goes, if you're a celebrity, they care what you had for breakfast. She said, but you're not a celebrity. She said, the difference between a memoir and an autobiography. She said, your autobiography is the story of your life. Very interesting. I'm sure your family and friends will love it. But if you want to write a memoir, you need to give the reader something. You need to make a promise to them that if you invest 8-10 hours into reading my book, I will show you a problem I faced and explain to you how I resolved it in a way that it can help you. I will give you something for investing in my book and my story. And she is a phenomenal coach in the world of memoir. And she worked with me to get my 200 and some thousand word story down to 100. I think we agreed on 110,000. And so now it's consumable and it's very focused. It's childhood sexual abuse and recovering from addiction. And And then when I finished that and I found out I love writing and
Yeah.
I'm living in a situation, I just looked over towards the ocean. I'm living in an ideal writer's paradise. I said, you know what? That memoir is kind of heavy. I said, I just want to write a novel, entertain
Right.
people, just a
Yeah.
fun, adventuresome story. And some of the characters in my real life are in my novel, and it's the first in a series of 3. So it's called Come September. It came out in June, and I'm just starting with the promotion and getting it known. And my intention is, if it does well, I'm halfway into the manuscript now for the sequel. And then if that is successful, I'll write a third book. So it's a trilogy. And I'm writing it like a Netflix series. And
Nice.
it's intentional, and it's got that kind of adventure and that kind of plot. It has issues. I deal with, there's some characters who have a drug problem. There's some characters, I don't have any abuse in there. One character has a little problem with his father when he's younger, but it's not sexual abuse, and it ends.
Yeah.
So, but it's meant to be a good read with a lot of character development. And my goal was to have people really care about these characters by the end. And people now in reviewing it are telling me, they're my friends. I relate to your characters, and I want to see another book. So I feel like I've gotten the job done. So
one thing I picked up on reading about Come September, we're recording this 2 days after September 11th, 24 years ago that happened.
Yep.
That I noticed is part of the storyline for Come September.
Yeah.
Is there a particular tie that you have to 9/11 to include that in the story? Like why is that a part of this book?
I wanted to deal with the loss of a parent,
Okay.
and it leads into a theme about terrorists and how they're funded through the drug trafficking. And so my group of teenagers are going to tackle an international drug cartel. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, but that becomes the adventure. And it's in retribution for the death of one of the protagonists' father, who was in one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center, or was crashed into the World Trade Center.
Okay.
So that's where that part of the storyline evolved from.
Okay.
I don't have a personal connection to it, other than the horror and disbelief that every person who was alive then experienced.
It's hard to believe it was 24 years ago.
I know.
First of all, but it feels like it was yesterday. Just when every time you see a picture or anything, your mind just transports you right back to that moment. But yeah, talk about a moment that really stood out for people, right? And I'm glad that that's part of it. Again, any type of story that reminds us of that day and the amazing heroes of that day as well, and the loss that we faced.
Yep.
I think it's a nice that you were able to include that in your story. I think that's amazing.
And I dedicate a good number of chapters to getting to know the family before that day, and then what happened on the day as they learned that their father was in that plane, and how the family dealt with that. And then the book goes on for 10 more years. So how the family grieved and how the family helped each other, how they evolved, and what it meant for them later in life, developing relationships, and the fear of losing the daughter's fear of falling in love with the man and losing him, having him taken from her as her father was. So I explore what would a family have gone through, because I don't know any of those families personally, and I do read about them, and they come forward and share their stories. But I wanted to really delve into the human dynamic around people who were personally touched through loss in that terrorist event.
What's a joy for you to write a novel over writing your memoir?
That with the memoir, knowing that people are still alive who are in that book, people know me really well, and it can all be fact checked. And so that storyline has to be 100% correct, exactly how it unfolded. I can't make any assumptions about what other characters in the book were thinking, what motivated them. I can only tell my story. Well, I'm writing the memoir in the third person omnipresent voice. I know what the characters are thinking. I know what motivates them, and I get to make it all up. And I get to make it up in a way to make it entertaining for the reader and engaging, and that they want to turn the page. And that's what an author's job is, to say, okay, you spent some money to get my book. You and I were talking before we started recording. Both of my books are audiobooks, and I do the narration.
Right.
And because my experience, well, I have the numbers. I'm selling as many audiobooks as I am printed books or ebooks. People love to listen. So
They do. They do. You have an amazing voice too. So that's wonderful that you're doing your own audiobook. I love an author that reads their own book. That, to me, because you know the next word, where a voice actor is reading it maybe for the first or second time. These words came from your soul. So you know what's going to come around the corner, and you can kind of lead us in that direction. I just find that to be quite interesting when an author reads for us.
well, thank you. And especially in the parts where there's dialogue,
Right.
because I know what these people sound like, and I know I can imitate their voices. And when I was told, I was asked at first, is it going to be an audiobook? I hadn't thought about it. And then people said, well, nowadays, if you want a readership, it needs to be an audiobook. So I looked into hiring a voice narrator and getting a studio. And I thought, well, that's a big budget. I don't know if I'm up for that. And I thought, wait a minute, that's my story. I write the whole book in first person. I'll tell my story, thank you, because I know how I want to emote it, and I know what emotion I want to bring across. And in dialogue, these people in my life, I know how they spoke and what they said, and I wrote the words I know that they said to me. But I think I should do that. I'm not going to hand that over to somebody who's never met me or these people. So,
Yeah.
And it was fun.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Gil, give us a sense. We kind of talked a little bit about this before we wrap up. Give us a sense where you're at now, today, in 2025, September. Where are you mentally, physically? How are you feeling? You talked about walking the beach. You talk about you're in a good space right now. Just give us some more updates. How are you personally, physically? Where are you at right now?
Well, physically, I have never been healthier. And I just had my August round of seeing all my physicians, my cardiologist and my hepatologist and my internist, everybody. I did the eyes, and I'm in great health. I don't take any medications. I'm pain-free. I'm thriving. I do yoga every morning for an hour and a half. I meditate every day. I say prayers after my meditation session. And what I explained to my best friend, I said, it's taken me almost a year to come to terms with this lifestyle now. I don't get up every day racing in my mind, where am I headed to next? When do I have to be at the airport? When's the next trip? When's the next flight? What's the next country? Where am I going now? What am I doing?
Yeah.
It's all gone quiet. And I can, for the first time in my life, just live in the moment. So when I'm writing, I'm in that moment of writing. When I'm doing yoga, I'm in getting in touch with my body and the breathing and the stretching. When I'm meditating, I'm in touch with nothing, I hope. That I just let it all go blank. I don't travel now that I did earlier in the year. And I said, no, I'm going to stay home for a while. It's not about the next appointment, the next flight, the next plane, the next this. I'm just going to live my life and enjoy. I cook all my own food. I eat very, very healthy food. And I live a very, very healthy lifestyle, and I enjoy it. So I thought, well, I have two jobs then. My job is to take care of me, my mind, my body, and my soul, and produce things that entertain people. Mm-hmm. And I love to write. So it's not even a job. I write 5 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have 2.5 hours either morning or afternoon, depending on the tides. Yes. And then every evening, 7:30 to 10, I'm at my computer and I'm creating a book. And I told my friend, I said, you know what? I said, sales are starting to take off. It's nice. I said, if even 1,000 people actually read my book, a book of mine from beginning to end, it's about 10-hour read. That's 10,000 hours of entertainment that I gave somebody. I mean, if they didn't put the book down, they obviously liked it. And I thought, well, that's a good contribution. I'll start with that. Let's go for 1,000. And it's clicking along. So we'll see where it all goes. So I'm in a very different space than I've ever been before. Okay. Again, to be 68 years old, pain-free, medication-free, thriving, I sleep well, I wake up rested, I'm never tired. I've never been like this. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter that it's my age, even when I was the busiest in my life. And I've always gone to the gym and I've always taken care of my physical training and all that, but I wasn't thriving. I got up, you put enough alcohol in your body before you go to bed, you don't wake up with a clear head. I was functional and I could do my job, but I didn't feel ready to just jump in and take the day by storm. And now it's a whole different feeling. And my ability to be present to the moment, I never realized I wasn't until now that I am. I would have told you I was. Of course, I'm aware of what I'm doing. Of course, I'm present to my body. Of course, I'm in the moment with people. And it turns out I wasn't.
Right.
I was about 75% of the way there on a good day. And so I'm experiencing my life in a new way now. And it is because 5 years of sobriety, total change of living conditions, and I'm financially able. Nobody writes books to make money. If you're one of those authors who takes off, God love you. And I don't know how that formula works, but you're not in it for the money.
Right.
And it's for the enjoyment and the satisfaction of knowing other people enjoyed it. So I'm not relying on that as an income source now. So in that regard, I'm not actively earning a living. I'm financially secure. I don't have to. And so that's just a blessing. And I cherish it every day.
Yeah, you said when you were a child, looking into the eyes of a horse, you found peace and safety. You found that spot where you knew that that's where you should be.
Yep.
Do you still get the chance to look into the eyes of a horse?
Absolutely. So pretty much all of my friends are horse people.
Okay.
And they have beautiful farms. I have friends. There's a large horse community just outside of Palm Beach in the town of Wellington. I'm only an hour away. I have very dear friends. They all have horse farms. They have horses. I lived in Lexington, Kentucky, the Kentucky Bluegrass for 5 years. And I have very good friends there with horses. And every time I visit, we hop in that car and go right out to the stables.
Nice.
And so if I need what I call my horse fix, I have a lot of places to go. And I don't ride anymore because for me, it's either or. I'm either going to ride and go for it and get my own horse and train my own horse, or not, and I've chosen not to. And I escaped. I rode for 50 years,
Wow.
and I don't have to even knock on wood now because I'm not riding again, and I never had an injury. And it's a dangerous sport. You get knocked around a little bit if you're in the horse world, especially as many hundreds and hundreds of horses as I rode. Your odds are you're going to get dinged. Stepped on, thrown off, something weird's going to happen. And I got out of 50 years without being injured. So I thought, you know what? And I still have a good back. And the riders suffer a lot of back pain as they get older. So I consider myself fortunate. So
it's amazing, Gil. I could talk to you all afternoon. This is amazing. Let's talk about your website before we go, because we can find you and we can follow your journey. The books are there. We can stay in touch with you as an author.
Yep.
So where do you want to send the readers, Gil? And then I just have one last question to ask before we go.
Okay. GilMerrick.com. And I have both Come September, the novel. There's also a tab you can click to go to a discussion guide for book clubs, because I write for that audience. Good. And then for Haunted Victory, there's also a button to push, and it takes you to also discussion topics for therapy groups. So I identified different themes that relate to therapeutic treatment, psychological treatment of my issues. And they're on the site, they're downloadable as PDFs. So there's some discussion there. And there's a email box so you can contact me. And of course, I read and answer every one of them that come through. So that's the way to access me. I've put the paperbacks and the ebooks, the Kindle and the audiobooks are all up on Amazon, but I'm also in lots of online bookstores and Spotify, and it's not hard to find, but the one-stop shop is Amazon. Everything's there for both books.
Okay. I'm going to turn the podcast over to you, Gil. I'm going to move into the audience for this last part. But you talk about some really dark days growing up, and some of the things you've been through. It's just, it doesn't even seem realistic that all this could happen over a lifetime. But you're in a place of hope now, and you're in a place there. I can see there's peace on you. Like there's just something about you. So that person that's listening, who is not in a good space right now, and they're hearing this conversation, going, "Oh, I would love to be where Gil is, but it just seems so far away." If I could just give you the podcast and you can wrap us up, Gil, talk to that person who's really struggling right now.
Yep.
And nobody knows what they're struggling with, but they're really battling. Can you
That's
just
right.
kind of lead us kind of out here as we close off?
I think I
Talk to that
can.
person, please.
I think I can. What I would say to you is the danger comes when we let the little voice in our head convince us that we're a victim of these circumstances. Maybe it's some kind of abuse we're suffering. Maybe we're abusing ourselves with a substance. And we look at our situation. There's a reason we're doing it. There's something we're trying to numb. There's some pain we're feeling that we don't know how to deal with. And if we can recognize that and say, okay, it is what it is. Here I am today. This is my circumstance. This is what's going on in my life. These are my struggles. These are my stress points. This is what I'm dealing with. And I'm using these substances. I'm using these behaviors that don't hurt me. But if I get into the, oh, woe is me, why do I have to deal with this? I don't deserve this. I'm a good person. Why me? Why do I have to deal with this? I call that the victim mode. I didn't make up the term. If you get into that mode and we become helpless because we surrender our power until we recognize in the face of our circumstances, we always have choices. And we may not like any of them. But if we look for them and say, all right, here's my situation. What are my choices? They're out there, and we might need someone to help us identify what they are. Then we have to play the game. Well, then what if I choose this? Where could that go? We don't know. What if I choose this? Where could that go? I don't know. What if I choose this one? Where can I go? But knowing that we're going to do something, so why not be in the driver's seat and choose what it is? And we may need the support of someone who loves us to help us see what that is. And recognize that if I choose to take this action, I'm drinking a lot. I need to get some counseling, or I need to go to AA. I need to find some kind of spiritual group, some way to support me so I don't have to deal with this alone. That's a choice. And not to play the, yeah, but what if, my partner is very sick, and what if they die? I'll never be able to cope with that. I'm going to need the alcohol. I'm going to need the painkillers. I'm going to need, if we start playing the, but, I don't think we get there. My coaching is have it be about today. What are my choices today? Look at what they are. And I may not like any of them, but I need to be in the driver's seat because that has power. And once I take my own power through choice, then I can move myself to the next level. But the number one message is, I don't know that any of us can do this alone. I had my dear friends supporting me. Then I had the medical community. I was at the University of California, San Diego, phenomenal group of people. And now all of a sudden I have a team of doctors helping me through this and giving me naltrexone to help with the cravings, and a psychiatrist to help me deal with the chronic post-traumatic stress that I was dealing with that I didn't even know I had. So it's understanding that we probably won't get through this on our own, and knowing that there are choices to be made, and I have to make the choices. And it's probably a good idea to ask someone to help me do that. That's what I would leave someone with. And number one, there's nothing wrong with any of us. I write at the end of the book, we're human beings. This is what we do. We go through life facing circumstances and making choices. There's nothing wrong that I was, the victim of a pedophile. There's nothing wrong with me that happened. There's nothing wrong if we have a substance abuse problem. It's a disease. There's nothing wrong with having diabetes or having leukemia or having any other disease. Alcoholism's a disease. Addiction's a disease. Well, treat it. No, I don't mean to say that glibly. It's incredibly difficult to move from being at the mercy of the substance and then moving into being in control and then healing. But it's a disease. It's not a character flaw. It's not something wrong with us. It's a disease that needs to be managed. And that's why I called my memoir Haunted Victory. Because even when we're sober, and I'm 5 years sober, I get up every day and I know one piece of bad news or one piece of good news, and I think I can handle just one drink, and I'll be right back where I was before. And it haunts you. It's there. It's a disease that doesn't get cured, but you can manage it. And right now I've successfully been managing mine for 5 years, and I know the game's never over. I'll be managing it every day for as long as I'm privileged to be on this earth. and there's nothing wrong that I have this disease. And that's the viewpoint I encourage people to take, because it's a healthy one, and it can give us the hope to do the right things.
Excellent. Gil Merrick, thank you so much for your books. Thank you for sharing your story, being so candid. And I think that's what's going to help people, is hearing a story that's not edited down, cleaned up, polished in a nice little bow. You just put it out there. This is who I am. This is what has happened to me. This is what I've been through and how I've come through this and my perspective now and where you're at today. I think it's beautiful. It's very symbolic to picture you walking along the beach and enjoying like a new perspective and a new place in life. It's amazing. I wish you had it earlier than you have it now. I really do. But I love that you have this now. This is
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And as I said, when you talk about being open, I write it all in the book. I'm not holding back. It's not an easy read. My friends have told me, boy, that's not an easy read. It has a very happy ending, but it's not an easy read. But having written it, I can own it now. And by owning it, now what I want to do is help people. And once I own it, it's easy to talk about, and it's easy to share, because I believe there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not ashamed of any of this. But I needed to get it on paper. I needed to get it out of my head, written, so that I can say, if you want to know, here it is. It's all in here. I didn't hold back on anything. And I pray it helps the people who read it. And I'm being told it does. So that's very rewarding.
Gil, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Everyone, all information for Gil in the show notes. Go out and grab a copy of both of the books. Grab the audiobooks as well. I tell you to get both. Buy the paper book and the audio. Get them both. And when you do, leave a great review. I know Gil would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, how it resonated with you, how it helped. And as you're listening to this, there's somebody in your life that is struggling, and they haven't heard this episode yet. They don't know about Gil's books. Please share this with them. Share these books. Buy a copy for them as well and give it to them. They need to see these, and they need to find that there's someone else out there who has walked a path that has some similarities to what they're walking, and knowing that there's someone else out there is probably one of the best first steps for that person to find some hope in their life. So, Gil, again, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate being here.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. Head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes. So finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.